Impro Theater and the cast and crew of this online performance would like to take this time to honor the indigenous peoples of the ancestral and unceded homelands we each inhabit, and to consider the legacy of colonization. In Los Angeles, we pay our respect to the Gabrielina Tongva peoples. Impro Theater supports the promotion of an anti-racist world, where we recognize diversity, equity, and inclusion as central to our values. We are listening, learning, and growing. We invite you to join us in taking action wherever we can to create a more just world. Impro Theater and the cast and crew of this online performance would like to take this time to honor the indigenous peoples of the ancestral and unceded homelands we each inhabit, and to consider the legacy of colonization and its far-reaching effects. Hey everybody, and welcome to Impro Talk. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Mike Rock. Very excited for today's guest, Paul Rogan, coming up shortly. Hey everybody, welcome to Impro Talk. I'm Mike Rock, your host. Thank you for joining us. And coming up soon, Todd Alcott. But first, a couple of announcements. But right now, he is a graphic artist, graphic designer, a playwright, a screenwriter, a director, an actor, a monologuist or a monologist, a cat wrangler, and he's got a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of stories to tell. Please welcome Todd Alcott. Todd, thanks for joining me.
Sure.
I'm so happy that you could find time to join us, because I know that, as you mentioned, you're in the middle of your pre-holiday rush for graphic art gifts.
Yeah, no, I've got a whole bunch of commissions coming in. People want things for Christmas presents. I'm doing a poster right now. Excuse me, this is my cat Smudge.
I know Smudge from social media.
Yeah, there you go. She's famous. And I'm doing a poster for a show that might transfer to the West End, and at the same time, I'm finishing my book. I've got a book coming out, which is great. They said that there was a book available before we had thought of what the book was going to be, but working on that, and I've got a new project to follow up my tarot deck with. And anyway, yeah.
So we gotta tease these things apart, because there's so much stuff. So we're gonna take these one thing at a time. So okay. You grew up in Crystal Lake, Illinois,
northwest suburbs of Chicago.
Which when I first met you back in the day, I may have mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it, but my mother grew up in Oak Park and used to go to Crystal Lake in the summertime, because her folks had a little house on the lake or something, and they would go and swim and do whatever. And so she always talked about Crystal Lake as her vacation place.
That was the basis of the town when it was first built. It was a vacation place for people from Chicago.
Yeah. And you've written, now here's the thing about this, our interview right now, is that you've written a lot of like memoir-like stories and published them on social media, which is why everybody who comments says, Todd, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book?
I've got plans. I will write a book. I mean, I have a bunch of writer friends, not in real life, just on social media, and they're like, oh, I know people here, get me a manuscript and I'll show it to people, and they've shown it to people, and people have been like, yeah, publishing's dead.
Oh gosh.
So then I have to figure out, well, how do I do this myself?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of ways to do that. I've got a book I'm working on now, and then I've got a second book I'm working on now, and at some point in the future I want to do the memoir and illustrate it in my own style, and we'll see if people are interested in that.
Fantastic.
But yeah,
People
no,
will be.
I feel like in a lot of ways that this is my true purpose in life, is to get that story written, the story of growing up in Crystal Lake.
Yeah, there are just so many like incredible snippets that you've put, that you've written about, and in just a few paragraphs, this I don't know, I would, I'm shy to compare it to any like any author's work, because then it's like, well, wait a minute, it's not exactly like that, etc. But it's just some of the stories are heartbreaking, and you feel in the way that when you watch a movie like about high school kids, sometimes you can feel like you've been transported back to your own high school experience.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
So reading these stories, I'm sure for many people, transports us back to being like, oh man, I can see that moment happening.
Right.
Like the guy that would randomly punch you.
Oh yes.
I had a guy that randomly punched me when I was in high school.
Yep.
And I don't remember his name. I mean, if I looked in a yearbook, I'd find his name, but I don't remember his name.
I remember my bully's name. I don't want to give it here because he's a private citizen, but it was a perfect bully name, just perfect. Anyway, and his explanation to the vice principal was because he's a puppy.
So weird.
I'd never met him. I had no idea who he was, and he made it his business to track me down between classes every day and punch me in the hall. Very strange.
So weird.
And then when the vice principal finally caught him slamming my head into the trophy case in the front hallway in the middle of passing period, he took us to his office and gave us both detention in the same room.
Yeah.
For 6 weeks for fighting in school.
because obviously that's the fairest way to do it. Jeez. Do you think that people, not that there were a bunch of people like him in your childhood, but do you think anybody directly made it into work that you've written, or is it less of a straight line than that?
Well, I mean, my father looms large in everything that I do, if only because he was such an incredible negative influence on my life that every decision I've made as an adult, I've first thought, wait, what would my father do? And then I would do the exact opposite of that. Because he was abusive and a narcissist and all of that sort of thing. But on the other hand, he was also my father, Royal Alcott. If you've seen the show Mad Men, I first started watching that show because my father was an advertising executive in that era of Mad Men. He all of the characters on Mad Men, he would have known those guys. He would have been like, oh yeah, I know who that is. That's this guy. He did this. And watching the show, I would be like, oh my God, I know that story. My father told me that story when I was like 8. So he was very charming, very charismatic, to the outside world, and then behind the closed doors of our house, to make it a cliche, he was just this, he was Donald Trump. Everyone had to cater to him. If he felt at all slighted, he took it out on everybody. And then he had this weird thing with these lectures that he would give us on the slightest pretext. And the example that always comes to mind first for me is I was 8 and had a homework assignment of a ditto. You remember ditto machines and the
Sure.
smell of that ink? Jeez. Anyway, it was a ditto machine diagram of the human ear, and I just had to label all the parts. And my father came in as I was doing this, and he started talking about the human ear and how fascinating it was and how sound operates and all of that sort of thing. And he kept me up until 4 o'clock in the morning, just and he would set up these little traps. He'd set up these little rhetorical traps for his 8-year-old son, to be like, so how does the sound enter the ear? And I'd say, well, it gets caught by the earlobe and it travels down the ear canal. Oh, it gets caught like a fish. Is that how it gets caught? How does it travel down the canal? By barge, perhaps? And I'd be like, well, and he'd be like, do you know? And I'd finally have to say, oh, no, I don't know. Then say so, God damn it. How the hell am I supposed to teach you anything if you won't tell me what you know? And
Wow.
It would go on for 6 hours. And finally my mother would come in and rescue me, because she was terrified of him as well. And anyway, but so yeah, that was a huge influence in my life. That whole era of graphics is where my mind is centered at this point. For some reason, those graphics feel real, and things today don't feel real to me, and I think it's just the transition to digital, where everything is done digitally now. There is no physical media. You have masterpieces created every day that have never seen a pencil put to paper, that have never seen an actual photograph that's been developed in a dark room. You take the photograph digitally, you add the graphics digitally, you publish it digitally, and there isn't any. So it's all too shiny for me.
Yeah.
And I like to think that me at the height of my Photoshop powers graphically, I have the strength and ability of a paste up man in 1962. That's the level of expertise that I work at.
Well, you're a bit too humble for me because of what you do, and we're going to talk about the graphics, the graphic art in a minute. There's just some it's turned into an industry. It's turned into a cottage industry, and cottage might not be the right word for it.
It's incredible, and I don't know how it happened, except through the miracle of social media. I owe my second career to the internet, because I was a screenwriter for 25 years. And I worked on, most famously, I worked on this movie Ants at DreamWorks. That was a long time ago. And in the past 10 years, just with everything else in the industry, there's been this huge compression. The number of buyers went from like 8 to 4.
Buyers meaning people who will make
people
movies,
who will actually pay you to write a screenplay.
Right.
There's lots of people in Hollywood still who you can write a screenplay for, but they won't pay you. In order to actually get the job, the paying job from the studio, you have to work with a producer for 6 months, a year, 2 years is my max, working for them for free, before the idea is developed enough in order to take it to the studio for the people who will actually pay you. And then a lot of times the studio executive will say, that's great, I love it, I have to take it to my people. And so you've got 4 studios in town who actually pay people, and they get every single idea in the world. So and on top of that, nobody's buying pitches anymore. All the studios just own these vast oceans of IPs, and they look for people to develop that. Anyway, that's a
Intellectual
whole other
properties.
conversation. What's that? Yes,
Intellectual properties.
Yes.
It is a whole other conversation. So growing back to Crystal Lake for a sec.
Yes.
Did you? I mean, that sounds like, and from reading your stories about it, that sounds like a pretty terrible childhood. What brought you joy? What was redeeming and escapist for you? When your father wasn't reigning tyranny.
It was always it was always just drawing. I would draw. I would copy Peanuts characters from when I was like 5. I always got a lot of joy from listening to music, and it was a long time before we had a record player, but we would listen to top 40 radio all the time. And it's funny because, like, this is a little sidebar, but I remember I was 12 or so, and my brother and I were playing gin rummy on his bed one summer afternoon, and the radio was on, just a little transistor radio sitting there on the bed, and they were playing whatever the top 40 hits of the day were, and suddenly, in the midst of all of that, this song came on that was it turned out to be "A Day in the Life" by the Beatles. And if you're just listening to 1970s top 40 radio, "A Day in the Life" sounds like your radio is broken. It's like, wait a minute, what is this? What is this? Oh my God, what is this? And then halfway through the song, you're like, oh my God, the world is ending.
It changed again.
No, wait, it didn't end. Now it's a different song. Oh wait, the world's ending again. We just stopped what we were doing and just looked at the radio for that 5 minutes. And at the end of the song, the DJ said, "A Day in the Life, the Beatles." And I was like, the Beatles. I got to remember that, the Beatles. And the first record I ever owned that was my own, my brother actually gave me a copy of the 1967 to 70 greatest hits Beatles album, the blue one. And for the very first time in my life, and you can cut all this out if it's boring, but for the very first time in my life, I dropped the needle on a record, and I was like, I think the first song is "Strawberry Fields Forever." And I was like, oh, that's the same band? And then after that was Penny Lane. And I was like, this is the same band? And then Sgt. Pepper, and With a Little Help of My Friends. And I had always thought that the radio just produced music. I didn't understand that there were individuals who created things in studios. And there was a whole matrix of how to get that on the radio and all that sort of thing. And that was just a huge mind-blowing incident for me. But always loved to listen to music. My parents had terrible taste in music, but we had tons of records, and I would sit on the floor. My parents belonged to the Columbia Record and Tape Club,
of course,
which meant that every month we got these records over the transom that nobody ever listened to, because that was part of the deal, was that they were just records that they sent you that you had to pay for. And so there was a lot of Broadway show tunes, and my mother was really into musicals, so there was things like No No Nanette and Camelot and Man of La Mancha, and I listened to them all, and I would sit there for the 40 minutes that it took to listen to the record, looking at the album sleeves. And I was always interested in graphics. I was always interested in, I was just thinking the other day about how every week the new issue of Time would come, and I would be like, okay, so here's an illustration on the cover of Time. It's by, Robert Peake or Robert Rauschenberg or one of the other great portraitists of the day. And I'd be like, okay, why is this special? What makes this special? What makes this so dramatic and alarming? And it took me a really long time to understand that, especially in the case of Time magazine, you have a literal red frame around the image, and I realized that it was the frame and the logo and the text that took any image. It could be any image, and it made you go, "Whoa, what's that?"
Yeah, that's important.
That's important. And when I started doing graphics on social media, and that's all it was just something to amuse myself, I realized that you could take anyone's picture that they post on social media, and by adding logos and a title and the name of the person, it became not just an album cover, but something that you would want to look at. And that just seemed like a miracle to me.
Yeah.
that just by changing the context of something, you could make it special and make someone look twice. And that of course is the first prerogative of any of design, is to hold the eye, and to make people go, wait, what is that? What is that? Is that real? Is that a real album cover?
Todd's talking about these. He'll take maybe like something from the Blue Note label jazz series, and maybe a Miles Davis cover, and for a friend, for one of Todd's friends' birthdays or something, he'll put their photo that he's lifted off of their social media, and then kind of like rearrange, use the same font that was on the original album, but it'll say "Happy Birthday, Chris" or something like that. And was that really the first use in social media of your like what's become your new business of
My
your
style.
graphics?
Yeah. Oh yes, absolutely. No, I mean, it's funny. The very first thing was, my wife took a picture of our cats,
Yeah.
Dee Dee and Gogo,
Yeah.
relaxing by their food dishes, and she showed it to me, and I said, "That looks like a Simon and Garfunkel cover." And I had a very basic version of Photoshop on my computer that had come with a Wacom tablet that I had many years ago, and I had been using Photoshop to make slides for pitch presentations for movie pitches. I would go in and then I would be like, "And this is the character," and I'd have Robert Downey Jr.'s face on somebody else's body in a spaceship or what have you. And so I knew how to use the program, or I taught myself how to use, and when I say use the program, I mean that Photoshop is this gigantic ocean of possibilities, and I use like one tiny little top layer of it. And yeah, so I just started doing that to friends of mine on social media, taking their photos and making them seem suddenly important by making them into an album cover. And all I was doing, and it's funny, you mentioned the Blue Note things. Reed Miles, another giant of 20th century design, he did all of those Blue Note covers, and to me it was like his accomplishment was so great that you literally can't think of 50s jazz without picturing his designs. in the same way that you can't think of 40s Pulp Fiction without thinking of those covers. It's there you go.
I'm going to see if I can highlight that for our audience real quick. Is that working? You can't tell if that's even working. Oh, it's not really working. I've kind of, there it is. That's, I mean, it doesn't, the Zoom doesn't let me show the whole thing, but that's Dee Dee and Go-Go and their Simon and Garfunkel like album cover.
The Where was part of it. It's part of what makes the thing work. That it's, for me, I realized it wasn't enough to just be able to pick the right fonts, place them in the right way, pick the right colors. But with the addition of the wear and the fading, I felt this intense pull of nostalgia. And I realized that I had found something that that could sustain me creatively. Oh, there you go. Well,
there, if you're watching Impro Talk, you're seeing the Dee Dee and Go-Go Simon and Garfunkel like album cover, and the clean version, and then the appears as though it's been worn down. And Todd's talking about how just treating the photo that way causes the artwork that way causes this sense of nostalgia because it seems real. It seems like
real.
Like a real.
It seems real, and it makes people go, "Wait, was there really an album with cats? What?" And because enough people said, "Wait, is that real?" I started doing more of them, and I created an entire recording career for Dee Dee and Go-Go. And it was I had all of the little interband conflicts and all of that sort of thing, and I created personas for both of them, and it was a whole lot of fun, and I had a whole lot of fun doing it. And then I started, once I had gotten all of my friends on social media tired of seeing my work, I went to Tumblr, because Tumblr was still a thing at that point. 2014.
Oh, Tumblr.
Yeah, Tumblr. But my favorite band, They Might Be Giants, still has one, a Tumblr account. And I started taking lyrics from They Might Be Giants songs and doing, there you go. That's right.
There's Dee Dee and Go-Go hanging out with, you can't see them both, but anyway, there's Nilsson and May Pang and John Lennon and
Dee Dee, and yeah, Peter Lawford and Vicki Lawrence are there. Yeah.
Yeah, let me ask you about that real quick. Did you know John and John back in New York? They Might Be Giants?
No, I mean, they're very approachable, and they play all the time. So I've seen them more than practically any other band, because it's just easy to see them, especially in New York. They'll be doing record signings and appearances and things like that. And I felt like, well, they'll get this. They'll get this. They won't be offended by it. And lo and behold, not only were the posts very popular with the They Might Be Giants community, but after a while, suddenly John Flansburgh contacted me, reached out, and asked me to start doing graphics for the band. And that was the first time that I was like, wait a minute. Could I do this for a living? That doesn't make any sense. Because I know a lot of graphic designers, and they go to school. They go to school, and a lot of them can't make a living at it, so they also teach. And I've never been to any school in my life. And who am I? Who am I to screw around with Photoshop and end up making money off of this? But the They Might Be Giants pieces were really successful, and around that time I thought, well, let me see if anyone's interested in these, and I started doing the pieces for other songs. I had been doing that for a year and a half. I can't even remember now. When a New York theater friend of mine, there you go, yeah, classics.
If you're watching, you can see a couple of They Might Be Giants songs in graphic art form by Todd. One is a Norman Rockwell Saturday Evening Post thing, and another is a sort of a graphic of maybe like a safety in the factory poster or something like that. How would you describe that one?
That was an AT&T ad.
Oh,
and
really?
And it was to demonstrate how much science goes into the telephone business.
Which is
There's a
great
guy,
because
yeah.
They Might Be Giants still had dial-a-song, still had a phone number. They have a 718 phone
They
number.
still do. Well, they had a regular phone thing in Brooklyn. Yeah. Free when you call from work, it said.
No, it's great. So then it went from just They Might Be Giants being digging what you're doing and including you in fan club offerings to a bigger thing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say a theater friend of mine from New York, a woman named Ann Holliday, still works for an aggregator site called Open Culture. And by sheer coincidence, her editor there was a big David Bowie fan and said, there's this guy doing David Bowie mashups on social media. Could you do a piece on that? And she was like, oh, I know that guy. That's my friend Todd Alcott. And she did this piece. And it's quite a story, actually, because we were talking earlier about my growing up in Crystal Lake and how I'd been struggling to tell this story. And I had actually tried to tell it as a TV show. I had developed a TV show. I had written the pilot. I had written a season arc. I had written a 5-season arc. I had worked with my management as a screenwriter to shape it. And they had said, finally, I don't think this is a TV show. This should be a movie instead. And I had written it as a screenplay and turned it into them. And weeks had gone by and they hadn't responded. And Anne's piece ran. And suddenly my sales went from a couple $100 a week to like $10,000 in a week. And I was like, oh, I have to address this. I have to take care of this. And I
must see what this is about.
I have to see what this is about. And literally that day, I had a phone meeting with my management for them to give me notes on the screenplay based on my life, where they were telling me they were telling me how to punch up my life. And I was like, I don't need this anymore. There you go.
There's part of Space Oddity. I'm sorry, I can't, my resizing skills aren't allowing me to show the entire graphics on Zoom, but well, let me ask you this. I hate that phrase, let me ask you this. With the, how the graphic cultural mashups have blown up. Todd does movies and reimagines movies. I'll show a couple of the horror ones. Reimagines movies as advertisements or cereal box covers or whatever it is. And also, music is probably the most. I'm guessing that music and bands are the most.
It's where
popular.
I started, but I'm branching out. I'm trying to become an all-purpose illustrator within this very narrow row that I've hoed here.
Yeah. Has your management and or I'm guessing you have people at the management company that want you to write another play and that sort of thing. Are they resigned to the fact that this is that this is more than just a distraction.
You're very kind to think that my management thinks about me at all. No, they're wonderful people. I don't want to put them down, and it's totally my fault that I've stopped writing and I'm doing this full time now. But like I say, it's there's my cat again. Oh, sweetie. It's a miracle. I don't know
Yeah.
how it's happened.
Yeah.
The you know, and the fact that I'm able to, the fact that me at this point in my life, I'm 60 years old, that I am able, oh sweetie, to spend an afternoon thinking about, well, how does ink soak into the paper? What effect does that create? And to take like the heroes cover there, to figure out, why does the ink look like that? How do the ink on the cover looks different from the ink on the pulp paper inside, you know, that sort of thing. And it's a crime. I shouldn't be able to do this. I shouldn't be able to make my living doing this, but that's what happened.
Well, I mean, it's inspiring and amazing for when you get to see an artist actually do something that they love doing and are curious about, and then actually have people appreciate it and you know can buy cat food with the proceeds.
Yeah, exactly. And the alien piece that you've got there, that was there's a gallery here in Los Angeles called Hero Complex, and in that summer when everything blew up, I was my entire day was spent placing printing orders, going to the printer, picking up the prints that have been ordered, rolling them up, putting them in tubes, putting them in flat envelopes with the cardboard and everything, and addressing them, and going to the post office, standing in line at the post office, processing 40 orders in a day. And there was no time for anything. And this fella, his name is Adam Smasher, and he runs this gallery called Hero Complex, and he contacted me about them printing and shipping my orders, so that I didn't have to spend all day doing that. And they showed me their prints. Their prints were a million times more gorgeous than anything I was capable of. And so I started working with them. And a few months ago, Adam asked me to do a series of horror movie posters for their gallery. And Alien, of course, is so iconic. And I thought, iconic monsters. You know, there was that series of General Mills cereals,
Of course.
where they took the monsters from the 1930s, Dracula and Frankenstein and the Mummy and whatever blueberry is supposed to be, a ghost, a Peter Lorre ghost, and they made them breakfast cereals for children. And I thought, that's the weirdest idea. And yet somehow by the 1960s, 70s, whenever those came out, that was seen as cute and funny. And those monsters had been completely neutered so that they could be things that kids enjoyed. And I thought, oh, well, that's what I should do with Alien. I should make it a General Mills monster cereal.
Into breakfast cereal.
And yeah. Oh, and that one, Scream, of course, is directed by Wes Craven. And Wes Craven's first movie was this thing called Last House on the Left. And this is based on the poster for Last House on the Left. So I thought it would be resonant to treat his big shiny horror hit from Dimension as a low budget independent production.
I don't even know if I remembered that Wes Craven directed Scream. I'm so embarrassed as a film.
And I'll say this about Wes Craven. I worked with him on a couple of projects that were never made, of course, because most of things in Hollywood never get made. But he was the nicest, classiest guy I've ever met in show business. And
wow, that's cool.
Yeah, no, and it's funny. You watch his movies and you think, wow, this guy's scary. He's not scary at all. He's incredibly kind, incredibly well-spoken, erudite, well-read. I could drop references to Samuel Beckett and whoever, and he would understand all that. And in a way, he was very frustrated by having to stick to the horror genre. There was a very funny story when I was working with him on a project. It was an adaptation of an Emile Zola novel called Therese Raquin, and we went up to Dimension to pitch it, and all Bob Weinstein wanted to talk about was Scary Movie. And Scary Movie, of course, was the Wayans brothers' parody of Scream, a movie that Wes Craven had directed for Dimension. And he was like, no, what? No,
what's happening?
I've made your company $1 billion and put them on the map. Why don't you want to support me in what I do? Anyway, yes, and there's another Wes Craven project, Nightmare on Elm Street, and this is based on very famous character from 19th century French literature, Fantomas. And there was a movie serial made about Fantomas, and he was a master criminal who could be anywhere at once and was responsible for every crime that was committed in the world. And there was a famous poster of him looming over Paris in this pose, in his white tie and top hat, of course. And I just thought, oh, that would be cool to put Freddy Krueger in there as another criminal that can't be caught and is everywhere at once, and so forth.
It's Freddy Krueger in the same pose of the original poster, kind of leaning with his chin in his hand and like looming over Paris, but his knife claw hand. What is that called? There's a name for his knifey claw hand thing.
Geez, I don't even know.
Is sort of stretched out, sort of ready to strike.
Well, of course, that's not Paris. That's the fictional town of wherever Elm Street is.
Nice. Well, it's amazing and inspiring that you were able to, sort of reinvent the way I advertise this chat show as a conversation with storytellers of all types. And you, of course, have been an actor, director, playwright, screenwriter, graphic artist, storyteller, because didn't you used to do solo storytelling in New York?
Yes, I was a monologuist. That's how I made my living as a monologuist, as weird as that sounds, for like 5 years. It's crazy.
That's wonderful. This is pre the Moth and all that kind of stuff. This is probably around when Eric Bogosian was haunting PS.
Yep, Eric Bogosian had his long-running show Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll at the Orpheum, and I was living around the corner from that. And there was briefly in New York City a market for straight white guys doing monologues, and I developed that into a show called Living in Flames, and that ran for a few months at the John Houseman Theater on 42nd Street, and that was nice. It was funny because my career as a monologuist, and you can cut all this out as well, but
I'm not going to cut it out.
My career as a monologuist began when I was a playwright. I had moved from Southern Illinois, where I was going to college.
He put quotes around that, by the way, for anybody who's listening. Todd put quotes around going to college.
And I moved to New York to become a playwright, and I found myself in a position where, geez, in order to be a playwright, I need to know people. I need to meet people. I need to be socially competent, and I'm not any of those things. So I started thinking, okay, what is a kind of theater that I can do that doesn't require actors, doesn't require a set, doesn't require sound cues, doesn't require light cues, and that left monologues. And I thought, and at the time, this is the late 80s in the Lower East Side of New York. There were a number of venues. There was like a dozen venues that had weekend late night open mics, essentially, where you could get up and do anything for 5 minutes. And by anything, by the East Village standards, it could be anything. And things got weird. But I thought, well, I could what I could do is write pieces that would work in that context, and then people would say, oh, that's cool, I like that, do you have any plays? And it turns out that's exactly what happened. I did the pieces, and people liked them, and they asked me if I had plays, and then I was a playwright. It was weird.
And I should say, I've done, I've done a little bit of research, and because we have an internet, was able to find a review. We didn't find what I wanted to find. I think there was a San Francisco Chronicle review,
yes,
of One Neck.
Yes.
I found that a couple of years ago, but I didn't find it today, or for today. But I did find Mel Gussow from the New York Times reviewing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that, it's like when friends who've done a lot of great, cool things, but like knowing that Mel Gussow saw a play that you wrote, but also you in it.
Well, that was the crazy thing, was that I didn't write the part. The play is called One Neck, and in the play, a serial killer crashes a Long Island dinner party, and hilarity ensues. And it's extremely violent. It's not for everybody. And when it came time to stage it, I had not written the part of the serial killer for myself because I was too young. I thought, well, this guy has to have been in a mental hospital for the past 10 years. So it has to be somebody 40. And I was like 28 or something. And as it happens, my career as a monologuist had gotten me to the point where, when the production looked around and was like, well, who should we put in this part? Well, Todd's the big name, which is hilarious because I was not the big name. I was like, well, okay, I'll do it. I knew how to play it. And the play ran at the Atlantic Theater on 20th Street. The Atlantic didn't put it on. They rented us the space. I don't want you guys to think that David Mamet knows I exist. Although I did meet David Mamet once at the opening night for his play Oleana, and there was an after party at the Ukrainian home there on 2nd Avenue. I don't know if you know New York.
Yeah, Todd, I did a show across the street from the Orpheum at the Telephone Bar and Grill for 10 years. So yeah, Oleana.
I was at Telephone every night.
Yeah, Oleana played at the Orpheum, where Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll had played, where Little Shop of Horrors had played.
Little Shop had been there, and now I believe Stomp has been there for the past 25 years.
Yep, yeah, Stomp has been there forever. So you're at Veselka maybe or something, and you?
No, it was the Ukrainian home, which is down the street from Veselka.
It looked kind of like it looked kind of like a yeah, I remember the Ukrainian home. Yeah.
The producer of Oleana was also my producer, a gentleman named Ron Kastner, who was very, very kind to me.
I remember that name. Wow, that's crazy. Anyway,
and he tapped David on the shoulder and said, David, this is Todd Alcott. He's a wonderful new playwright. And Mamet turned around and said, hey, we got the same haircut. That was
I've heard Todd, just for anybody who's just listening, Todd had taken his baseball cap off for that entire story in order to get to that punchline. That's well done. That's foresight.
Yeah.
That's what playwrights are. No, Mel Gusso, who was a famous New York Times theater critic, said, before his identity is revealed, the play is a malevolent look at the emptiness of the cross section of the 30-something generation. Afterward, it veers perilously close to a horror movie.
Well, it's funny. I remember going to see Blue Velvet in 1986 at the D.W. Griffith Theater on 59th Street. That's where it was playing, because it didn't play in big theaters. But I remember seeing the intensity of the violence in that movie. I still had it in my mind that I was a playwright, and I was thinking, why can't you have that on stage? Why can't you have something that's that intense on stage? I was in St. Mark's Books on St. Mark's Place back when it was still on St. Mark's Place, back when it still existed. There was a book by Adam Parfrey called Rants that was a collection of writings by insane people. And I picked up the book and I was like, well, this looks interesting. And I turned to this one thing. The title was "I Wish You All Had One Neck." And it was a letter from a serial killer named Karl Panzram in the 1920s. And it was a letter from him to a ladies association who was trying to get his execution commuted so that he wouldn't have to be executed. And the letter from him to them is essentially a big long no thank you. But the pull quote was, "The only thanks you will ever get from me for your efforts on my behalf is that I wish you all had one neck and I had my hands on it."
Oh my gosh.
and my blood ran cold, and I thought, oh my God, if I could get that idea on stage, that what I was looking for in a play at that time. I had been toiling away at my desk for years without getting anything produced anywhere. And I had back then there were these books that were published every year, the Playwrights Source Book, where you could look up the addresses and names of everybody in regional theaters all over the country, and you could type up your plays and submit them to and I had gotten tired of getting polite rejections, and I thought, I need to write something that demands a response, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And
like you're writing to the Ladies Society who was trying to get your
exactly
sentence commuted.
And I had, I was hugely influenced as a playwright by Samuel Beckett and Sam Shepard and Harold Pinter, and I was sending my plays to theaters who didn't recognize any of that. Like, they would just read my plays and go, this is dumb. And so I thought, no, I'm gonna make you pay attention. And so I wrote this play about the serial killer who crashes Long Island dinner party, and I sent it to a New York agent whose name is too perfect. Peregrine Whittlesey was her name. Peregrine Whittlesey. And she called up and she said, "Todd, I just wanted to tell you that this is the best play that I have read in 17 years of being an agent, and I cannot represent you because it would be immoral."
Wow.
And I was just thrilled. I was just, yes, this is exactly what I want. And therefore I was able to call up other agents and say, well, there's this agent, Peregrine Whittlesey, who said this. And they're like, what? I want to read that play. The play got produced in 1992 at the theater where I was working at. It was called Home. It was called Home for the Drama and Arts, Home for Theater and Art, something like that. Directed by a guy named Randy Rollison, who was wonderful. We had a great cast. Allison Janney was in the play. She was great. She was great to work with. I got to saw her head off every night. That was actually one of the high points of the production was, so the deal is that Allison Janney, Oscar award-winning actress, brilliant actress, is strapped to a chair, and me as the serial killer, I knock her chair over. So the two of the legs of the chair are on hinges, and so she falls over at a 90-degree angle onto a pad, which is behind a kitchen counter. And then I would take an electric carving knife, and I would turn it on, and I would go down behind the counter, and we had a block of styrofoam, so you could hear the knife cutting into something. So it'd be like, and
Oh my
and one night, a guy in the audience stood up to go and fainted. He keeled over backwards, keeled over the back, and we had to stop the show and make sure the guy was okay. And this was, I wish we were able to use this on the poster, but there was no way to say it succinctly. But when he came to, everyone was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, no, I'm fine. The same thing happened to me at Silence of the Lambs."
What a great pull quote to
I know,
promote
exactly.
the play. I was at BAM at the movie theater to watch the HARF, the Japanese film Audition, and a guy, and I grew up as like a first aid kid, like with my first aid badge and all that kind of stuff, looking to help people who were in distress. So I was kind of like keenly aware of running toward the accident. A guy gets up at a pivotal scene during the film Audition, which is pretty gory at times.
Well, and the last 20 minutes is hard to take.
Right. And he's walking up the aisle, and I hear a thud, and I just know that he's fainted, and I jump up to him and I drag him out of the theater. I miss the last, after the ankle.
It doesn't end well, by the
way. So one thing that I did not know, so did that whole cast then go from New York to San Francisco, or was it the other way around?
No. Yes, no. The play One Neck was first produced in San Francisco, and
okay.
I'm blanking on the name of the theater. It's a wonderful production. It's a great cast, and a man who has since become a good friend of mine, Brian Parks. He was working for the Village Voice, and
also a brilliant playwright, Brian Parks.
Yes, Brian Parks, wonderful guy. And he reviewed the San Francisco production and mentioned that it's a shame that one of New York's best playwrights is being produced in San Francisco. And that was very nice of him to say. He's been very kind to me for my whole career. So I was out there for the premiere, and it was that was a wonderful experience. And but of course, there's no money in this. It's nice when someone produces your play, but there's no money in it.
Another thing that you do that I haven't really, we've never really talked about, and we don't have to spend a great deal of time on it now because there's other things to talk about. But you do these. You've published a few sort of like film analysis.
Yes. Well,
books.
In 25 years as a screenwriter, one of the things that a screenwriter has to do is look at their favorite movies and kill them. You have to take a screenplay like Jaws, and you have to watch the movie, and you have to take apart every scene until you know why the screenplay works the way that it does. And I mentioned Jaws because it's a miraculous screenplay that the movie works like gangbusters, and they were writing it on the fly during production, and the screenplay has no right to be as good as it is. And so I'm always looking at that going, all right, what is this movie about? And in the world of screenwriters, I'll give you a little behind the scenes thing. When I was working on Ants, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was running the studio at the time, I would be talking to him about a scene. Okay, so here's our ant, and he's doing this, and I'm thinking we could have like, the production design. It would be like this kind of Brazil kind of thing, and anyway, I would talk about the scene in terms of film history, sociological history, thematic elements, and every time Jeffrey, I would get like 10 words into my explanation and he'd go, all right, stop. What does the guy want?
Wow.
And I didn't know how to answer that question. And now looking back on it, it's amazing that I got into that room without knowing the answer to that question.
Wow.
And he said it so many times that I wrote it down on a postcard and stuck it up over my desk. It said, what does the guy want? Jeffrey Katzenberg. Oh, he's very smart cookie. He was telling me that when he was working at Disney, what he did was go back to Disney's storyboards for like Pinocchio. And he saw that, okay, so the first act has 10 beats, the second act has 10 beats, and the third act has 4 beats. And so he said, well, that worked for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's gonna work for Shrek, you know. He hammered this thing home to me. And it turns out that this is basic screenwriting knowledge that I should have known, which is there is only one question that the screenwriter should be thinking about. What does the protagonist want?
Yeah.
And I started a blog called What Does the Protagonist Want? That would introduce people to this concept of how to look at screenplays, and in so doing, learning how to write screenplays. And so looking at Jaws, for instance, I said, okay, who is the protagonist? Chief Brody. What does he want? What does he want? What does he actually want? At the beginning of the movie, what he wants is to blend into this new community that he's joined, because he's from the big city and they're a small town and they do things different. And how is he going to learn how to be a police chief in this new community? And then the shark attack is a complication. And so the movie becomes about there's this guy, he's got this problem, the shark is attacking people, but his primary goal is to get along with the community. And so we see the number of compromises that he makes in order to get along with the community, in order to be that guy. And he knows there's a shark, and he thinks, well, I'm a police chief. I've got all kinds of resources at my disposal. I can deal with that. And there's people who are experts in sharks, and I'll get them in, and they'll know how to deal with the shark. And then ultimately, it comes down to, nope, I've got to do this. And so he goes out in the boat, and then eventually those 2 other guys are incapacitated. And in the final minutes, he's like, it has to be me. I have to deal with the shark. That is how I will reconcile my relationship to this community, is I myself and no one else will kill this shark. It's that pressure that makes the audience stand up and cheer when the shark finally explodes, because they've been feeling all of that for the 2 hours of the movie. Anyway, that's my little lecture on Jaws. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I love that. I love the, I've never studied screenwriting, and I've never really gone deep into serious analysis of film structure and that sort of thing. I go about as deep as it's probably some version of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey.
Well,
but I love understanding the smoke and mirrors and the wires and the tricks and this, et cetera, that are behind the silver screen, that are actually that's what's going on with the writing, and that the writing has created this structure that is making everything work. And then when you blend that with...
and when you go to see a movie and you start getting bored, what has probably happened is that the director has had an idea, or more probably the producer has a different goal from the screenwriter. The producer wants something else to happen with this movie, and so other elements of filmmaking costumes, performance, process. A lot of directors are interested in process. They take precedence over the screenplay, where the writer has spent, years of their life pursuing this thing of, what does the protagonist want? What is he going for? What's in his way? How do we ratchet up that tension? What forces are arrayed against him? All of that sort of thing. And somewhere along the line during the production, someone other than the writer has taken their eye off the ball, and in the end result, you've got the audience going, I don't know what's happening. What's happening? And then they get bored. Which is not to say that there's only one way to make a movie, and that's another thing that I've come to learn. What the Protagonist Wants, the website, and this book series, it's available at Amazon. If you look up Todd Alcott, What Does the Protagonist Want? I've got 5 or 6 books out. I did a book on the Coen brothers, Kubrick, Spielberg, a few other people, and it's fascinating if that's how you want to write movies. And recently I've been watching early David Cronenberg and Fellini, and realizing, no, there's other ways to make movies.
Right. Would you describe that as like Sid Field formulaic or something like that, or Save the Cat, that sort of thing?
Well, gosh, I personally don't get a lot out of those books. I worked on a project once where the director swore by Save the Cat, and she had every step in Save the Cat on a notepad, on a piece of notepaper up around the room where we were working on the screenplay. And she'd be like, okay, so we've got the false victory of Act 2, but where's the dark night of the soul? We need the dark night of the soul. And it's like, it's not how every movie works.
Yeah.
But it's and more to the point, if you're working on a studio project, nobody reads Save the Cat. Save the Cat. Save the Cat is a book for amateurs to understand what they're doing.
So if you want to check out Todd's, he's got books on Kubrick, Spielberg, Batman on the big screen, Girl. Oh, sorry. That's a play, Girl in the Ashes, of course. Coen brothers. Before we're running shy on time, Todd, but no, you do not have to apologize, because you have so many things that I want to talk about. But last year, a pretty amazing thing happened, and I'm going to ask you to explain it. But Elvis Costello did a time capsule box set of the album Armed Forces, and in that lavish box set, there are prints of the vintage grenade and gun poster, and the and original postcards of each band member by Todd Alcott. You created pulp novel book covers of the songs from Armed Forces, starring Elvis as the protagonist in precarious situations.
Right.
How did that come? First of all, how did that come about? Secondly, a friend of mine, Ava Lind, was a model in the 50s for those men's magazines.
Oh, fantastic.
And she would get photographed in these, hanging off a helicopter with a machine gun or something. Right. And then the artist would then make that into a drawing.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And she's been on the show. And but tell me how the Elvis Costello connection happened, because I'm jealous.
If you find out, please let me know. I have no idea. I have no idea. I got an email one day from one of his guys, a fellow named Steve Maidment, who's been very kind to me. And he didn't even say, "Here's how we found out about you."
I love it.
he just said, we're doing this reissue of Armed Forces. Would you be interested in doing a piece? And the crazy thing was that I gave him two pieces because I assumed that one wouldn't be good enough. And so I gave him two pieces and he said, Elvis loves these. Would you like to do more? And I ended up doing a piece for every song on the album. And to my amazement, to my absolute flabbergasted amazement, he reconfigured the packaging of the entire album package in order to highlight these pieces that I had done.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
each piece became its own little booklet, and there would be a little essay inside the booklet about that song or some aspect of production. And each pamphlet was a different size, could be depending on what kind of whether it was a pulp novel or a comic book or a recruitment poster or what have you. And he the package came out great, and I still never found out how he knew about me. But all I can imagine is that he has Instagram like anyone else, and I tag everybody. I always tag the artists that I'm doing pieces about, because I don't want to I don't want to be a ripoff artist. I don't want to be one of those
Right.
guys who publishes bootleg material and makes a lot of money off it. I want the artists to know I'm doing this. If you object, please let me know. And some of
Yeah.
them have.
Oh, really? You've heard from people that said don't.
Well, you don't hear from them. What happens is that Etsy removes the piece from the store.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I don't want to
You
bad
don't.
talk bands who have every right to control what images are put out there under their names. But mostly bands have been incredibly supportive. The only people who aren't are the song publishers, who often aren't the bands.
Yeah.
It's a separate company, it's a separate legal entity, and I'll get messages from members of bands who are like, oh my God, that piece is so great. Thank you so much. That looks fantastic. And then a few months later, the piece will be taken off by their publishing company. Anyway, but that's one of the hazards. And it's
such
funny,
is the world of business.
this is the world of business. Ah, there you go. And yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
cool.
it's just fantastic. I
love that you're as fascinated by it, and you're the person who's me.
Well, the thing is, and this will be my first public acknowledgement of this. When Elvis Costello asked me how much I wanted to get paid, I was like, I'm not going to charge Elvis Costello. He's been such an enormous influence on my life. I'm not gonna soak in for doing some graphics for him. This is a huge step forward for me. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but the original package of Armed Forces was created by this graphic artist named Colin Fulcher, who went by the name Barney Bubbles, and he was the house designer for Stiff Records. And in the same way that Reed Miles had become the face of Blue Note, Barney Bubbles was the face of Stiff Records, and who put out all of these great albums in the punk era. And the idea, and his work had an incredible impact on me as a graphic artist, because of the way that he would both create a design, and the design would tell you that it was a design. It's like that double bind of I'm going to show you the trick, and now you're going to like me even better because I've shown you the trick.
Right, the sort of the Penn and Teller
exactly
thing, yeah.
And the idea that my work would be showcased amid a package designed by Barney Bubbles he's not only was a fantastic graphic artist, but he also died young. He committed suicide. He was bipolar, and the idea that my work would be there, that was something that was literally beyond price to me. The idea that my work would be elevated to that level, it was too humbling. I couldn't ask to be paid for something like that. It was an incredibly nice thing to happen. And everyone was very kind to me. The package looks great. I'm looking up here because that's where it's sitting. Yeah, Elvis Costello. And then he was nice enough to give me good tickets to see him at the YouTube Theater the other night.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
There's Todd's Etsy. It's called Todd Alcott Graphics. Alcott with 2 T's. That's yeah. I mean, I'm so happy for you because I've
Thank you.
Been an Elvis Costello fan forever as well, and I just that's the coolest thing. That's just the coolest thing. It really is. Yeah. It's the greatest thing. Excuse me. It's the greatest thing.
Isn't it just the greatest thing? Elvis Costello reference for you non Elvis fans out there.
Well, Todd, I'm very excited for your book that you haven't revealed anything about.
It's Hero Complex Gallery is going to publish it. It's called Ephemera: The Cultural Mashups of Todd Alcott.
Oh, it's a book of these things.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's sort of summing up everything that I've done in the past 5 years or so, and it should be coming out early in the new year.
That is fantastic.
Weird. I still have no idea how these things happen, and I'm making them.
I'm so excited that you're not actually going to the. I remember you told me, you said I go to FedEx or FedEx office rather. I get them to print the thing on shiny paper. I roll up to put them in the postal tubes. I go. I'm so happy that you've blown up into where you have a company doing that for you.
I have a company doing that for me, and it allows me to sit at my desk all day long.
Todd Alcott has been our guest, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Todd.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. This is very nice.
It's a pleasure having you here on Impro Talk. Thank you for joining us, and cool. We'll see you all on another Impro Talk in the future. Go to Todd's Etsy page and order some gifts for family and friends, and buy something for yourself while you're there. Yeah. All right. See you next time, everybody.
Cool. Thank you.